Dear children, good morning. I am Pradeep Bauthakur sir. I hope you liked the previous two sessions of your English class. In today's first session, we are continuing further with the lesson Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. Let us go to page 19 and read the first paragraph. A few moments later, we all lifted our eyes in awe as a spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters, and troop carriers roared in perfect formation over the Union buildings. It was not only a display of pinpoint precision and military force, but a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. Only moments before, the highest generals of the South African Defence Force and police, their chests bedecked with ribbons and medals from days gone by, saluted me and pledged their loyalty. I was not unmindful of the fact that not so many years before they would not have saluted but arrested me. Finally, a chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of the black, red, green, blue, and gold of the new South African flag. In this paragraph, Nelson Mandela talks about the air display by the South African Air Force. He also talks about the show of respect for him as president by the generals of the armed forces. Mandela also discusses the significance of all these. After addressing the assembled guests, Mandela talks of the spectacular array or amazing, well ordered display by the jets, helicopters, and troop carriers of the South African Air Force. Mandela says that a few moments after his speech as newly sworn in president, everyone present there lifted their eyes in awe or fear, accompanied by deep respect, to look at the attractive display by the Air Force as the aircrafts roared in perfect formation or perfect arrangement over the Union buildings, which is the seat of government. Mandela remarks that this display by the Air Force was not just a show of pinpoint precision or absolute precise accuracy and military force or might or prowess by the South African Defence Forces. There was another meaning behind this display, and that was that the South African military wanted to demonstrate or show their feeling of loyalty or dedication or devotion to democracy. The display was also a show of the military's loyalty to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. Freely and fairly elected means that elections were not held under the control of the white administrators of South Africa. The elections were held impartially, with equal treatment to all, in which all eligible voters of all races, the whites, the black skin community, and other colored people participated or had the right to participate. The elections, in fact, took place under the direction of Independent Electoral Commission or IEC, with members from outside South Africa included in it. Mandela further says that moments before this display by the Air Force, the highest generals of the South African Defence Force and police saluted him and pledged or solemnly promised their loyalty or devotion to him. What Mandela means to say is that the generals and police, with a legacy of hundreds of years of white minority racial rule, had accepted him as the president, the first black president of South Africa. The ribbons and medals that decorated the chests of these generals were a reminder of the legacy of white rule. Mandela also says that he was not unmindful of, that means he was conscious of, he was aware of the fact that not so many years before he would not have been saluted and given the highest honor by the generals. He would actually have been arrested and put in jail. Mandela had been released from jail only in 1990, and in 1994 he was sworn in as president. There has been a total transformation. Now, the ruled have become the rulers, and the rulers have become the subjects. By sheer determination and the will to become free, the minority whites have been forced to become subservient or subordinate to the will of the majority. And finally, the creation of the new South African flag in the air by the releasing of the colors of the flag in the form of black, red, green, blue, and gold smoke by a chevron of Impala jets announced to the world of the ushering in of a new era in South African society. Now, let us go to the second paragraph of page 19, which reads as follows. The day was symbolized for me by the playing of our two national anthems and a vision of whites singing Nkosi Sikelel iAfrika and blacks singing Die Stem, the old anthem of the Republic. Although that day neither group knew the lyrics of the anthem they once despised, they would soon know the words by heart. Mandela says that the day of his inauguration was symbolized for him by or represented by the playing of the two national anthems. One was Nkosi Sikelel e Africa of the blacks, and the other was Die Stem of the whites. There was also another thing that symbolized the day for Mandela, and that was the vision or the beautiful sight of the white people singing the anthem of the blacks and the blacks singing the anthem of the whites. The anthem of the whites was also the old anthem of the Republic of South Africa. This act of each race singing the other's anthem was a sign of mutual acceptance. This showed the unity among the people of the new Democratic Republic of South Africa. But some time back, both the blacks and the whites hated or had a very low opinion of the other's anthem. On that day, the situation had changed. Though neither group knew the lyrics of the anthem they were singing, they would soon know the words by heart. This was a situation of mutual assimilation or absorption of each other's culture. The third paragraph reads as on the day of the inauguration, I was overwhelmed with a sense of history. In the first decade of the 20th century, a few years after the bitter Anglo-Boer War and before my own birth, the white-skinned peoples of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned peoples of their own land. The structure they created formed the basis of one of the harshest, most inhumane societies the world has ever known. Now, in the last decade of the 20th century, and my own eighth decade as a man, that system had been overturned forever and replaced by one that recognized the rights and freedoms of all peoples, regardless of the color of their skin. In this paragraph, Mandela says that on the day of his inauguration or formal swearing in as president, he was overwhelmed or overpowered by emotion when, at that moment, his mind went back in history, recollecting the circumstances that led to the establishment of a system of racial domination of the dark-skinned people. Mandela had become emotional because he was aware of the intense suffering and superhuman sacrifices of the blacks for a long period of time. In the first decade of the 20th century, that is sometime in the period from 1901 to 1910, a few years after the bitter or painful Anglo-Boer War, fought from 1899 to 1902 between the British Empire and the South African Republic and the Orange Free State, the two independent Boer states. So, a few years after the bitter Anglo-Boer War and before Nelson Mandela's birth, the white-skinned peoples of South Africa patched up their differences or improved or repaired their relationship and erected or established a system of racial domination or racial suppression or subjection against the dark-skinned people or majority black community of South Africa. The system of racial domination created by the whites formed the basis of or gave rise to one of the harshest or most cruel, merciless, and brutal societies, and also the most inhumane, or without showing any compassion or sympathy for misery or suffering. The cruelty or lack of sympathy was of the most extreme level the world has ever known. And Nelson Mandela himself had suffered extreme cruelty and brutality during his long period of imprisonment. After more than 80 years of oppressive and suppressive dictatorial rule, finally, in the last decade of the 20th century, and Mandela's own 8th decade as a man, that brutal system had been brought down or overthrown forever. That inhuman, discriminatory system of racial domination had been replaced by a freely and fairly elected democratic system. This new system recognized or acknowledged the validity of the rights and freedoms of all peoples. Rights here would mean the basic human rights as a freedom, such as freedom from discrimination, right to life, liberty, personal security, freedom from slavery, freedom from torture and degrading treatment, etc. Freedom here would mean freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of choice, and freedom of speech. These freedoms from now onwards would be enjoyed by all the people of South Africa, irrespective of racial differences. Now, the next paragraph reads as follows. That day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people, whose suffering and courage can never be counted or repaid. I felt that day, as I have on so many other days, that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. That long and noble line ended and now began again with me. I was pained that I was not able to thank them and that they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. Now, Mandela tries to tell us that a day when the rights and freedoms of all the peoples got recognition did not come about easily. Thousands of his people, or the people of South Africa, had to make unimaginable sacrifices to get that freedom from racial discrimination. Mandela says that the suffering and courage of these people can never be counted or repaid. These were people who were born into racism and died with racism. All their lives, they had to suffer the cruelty of the brutal white regime or government. They were denied their basic human rights and freedoms. They fought against the injustice and were suppressed in an inhuman manner. They were arrested, put in jail, and brutally tortured. They lived, suffered, and died for their fellow South Africans. When Mandela says that he was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before him, what he means to say is that he was inspired by the indomitable or unbeatable courage, the relentless or continuous struggle, the inhuman suffering, and superhuman sacrifices of these African patriots who had lived and died before him. Mandela describes those patriots as the long and noble line. The long and noble line ended, but Mandela says that it again began then with him. He would carry onward their struggle for justice, freedom, and equality. Mandela expresses his pain at not being able to express his gratitude to those patriots for their invaluable or most precious contribution for the freedom of the South African people from racism. He was also pained at the patriots not being able to see the fruits of their sacrifices. In a way, Mandela was paying homage to the predecessors. That's all for now. Thank you, children.